So this video is going to be our first introduction into our second major paper, the problem solution paper. Let me read a little bit here. A problem solution paper focuses on a particular problem or set of problems. As the essay writer, you will then need to come up with a solution or several solutions to a stated problem. And just for a moment, I want to pause over the language here. Um, Just in terms of the scope of this assignment, you might be better off just focusing on a single problem. If you feel like you want to write about a set of problems, plural, talk to me about it, and we'll see why, and we'll see what's going on with that. But for our purposes, you'll probably have more than enough um, to write about if you just focus on a single problem and perhaps solutions plural. Um, Maybe we'll talk about that more with the second document we're going to look at here, but identifying a problem and then at least a solution, if not different solutions. Problem solution papers are common in writing classes and on exams as well as other academic and professional contexts, as they allow you to substantively explore an issue and leverage critical thinking to respond with a solution. So this is going to be practice. This is practice for us doing a thing, in other words, that goes on all the time, whether it's this class, your other classes, perhaps your job, um, but just to exercise some of those skills, identifying important problems, and then proposing meaningful solutions to them. One way we're going to go about that, just here to finish off this brief paragraph, is um, with a paper like this, as opposed to, let's say, our previous one, there's going to be a few more moving parts. Um, so it might be useful to do something like craft an outline and use it to help anchor the organization and the structure of your paper as you um, present, for example, your problem, the different facets of your problem, and then corresponding solutions to the problem. You'll notice in the prompting materials that we have here that I have this word rhetorical in parentheses. Um, so just reading it without that for a moment, identify the situation. The situation you're going to address in the problem solution paper should be identified early and clearly prior to beginning your paper. So in other words, this is sort of asking you to identify the topic, identify the idea, the issue. In this prompt, we're calling it the situation. And it kept reminding me of this idea from the realm of rhetoric, known as the rhetorical situation. And we'll talk about that in the, next week or two, even more and ongoing, not just once. Um, I'm mostly putting this here, and you'll see it all throughout. You're probably going to get really tired of seeing it so much. Um, but what I'm hoping to do here is remind you, in addition to the technical sort of details of what rhetorical situation is, again, we'll cover that. I want to take any opportunity I can this semester to um, encourage you and invite you to practice increasing your rhetorical awareness and sensitivity so that when we look at things like problems and solutions, having that awareness, that sensitivity to the rhetoricity of a situation, of the texts that we'll look at related to that situation or otherwise, is only going to increase the effectiveness of our writing. So that's why you're going to see this in parentheses a bunch. So this document right here is just how to write this paper. We're going to look at the actual prompt after this, but this is just giving us a rundown of some of the key things to do um, as we approach this paper, as we just are becoming acquainted with this paper. So, in terms of starting it, we need to identify the situation that we want to write about. In other words, the situation that contains or is constituted by or is otherwise related to a problem. Um, this needs to be done early in the process, even before you start writing. This is you need to know that in order to have something to write about, and especially when it comes to writing about solutions, gathering sources about problems and solutions, etc. Um, I have some examples here. You can read these at your leisure, but what I will say is um, similar to what we did with our reaction paper, and what we're going to do with all of our papers really throughout this course. Um, you'll want to pick a situation or a topic or an issue that is meaningful to you somehow. I recommend you try to pick something, especially with this paper, but really all of our papers, that's related to your major, your discipline, or the career field you want to go into. That would be um, a really neat way, I think, to become more familiar with your major and your potential career field. Um, and who knows, it might become useful to you down the line for a special project having to do with that, or either one or both of those things. Um, but you'll want to pick something that has or presents definite problems for whoever, for various people. That's up to you. Um, and that you could propose solutions for those problems. Um, a lot of times students will get an assignment like this and they'll say, well, I want to take a look at the, Apple website or ESPN magazine or something. Okay, those not that those things are inherently wrong or bad or anything, but what is the problem associated with it? What is the problem inherent to it? And what solutions could you propose to those problems? That's why I offer you a little bit here just to get you thinking, sort of again, like we did with our reaction paper. But I also want you to consider how you are perceiving yourself in relation to whatever situation you're going to end up choosing. Um, this is going to become more and more, I think, central to our writing as the semester goes on. I want to see you emerge from your writing. I want to see you in your writing. I think that's important. I think not only to generate buy-in and to increase hopefully your interest, but also it's important. It's important for you, your voice to emerge. It goes straight to the idea of agency and actualization. And these things are at the very top of why we do things like go to college and endeavor to learn and develop as people. So when you're considering your situation, again, your topic, your interest, and the problems associated with it, potential solutions, where are you in all of that? How do you figure into all of that? What are you going to have to say personally? Sure, you can figure out a problem, propose some solutions, but don't lose yourself in all that. I'm not telling you to completely write a reflection for, 5 pages or an op-ed, but as you do your academic writing, you and your voice definitely belong as a significant augment to that academic writing. So these are some of the key components. As we'll see, probably this week or especially or definitely next week, if not this week. Um, a lot of times when you go and look up, for example, online, how to write a problem solution paper, you're going to get things like this. What's the situation? What's the problem? What's the solutions? And then this idea of evaluation. Um, if I could be, I don't know, if I could translate some of this for a moment, really what you're doing here, you're going to write an introduction similar, not exactly, but similar to how you would sort of standard typical essay. That's what we're doing here. We're introducing a topic or an issue, contextualizing it for our reader, situating our reader once again, but we're going to put a little more emphasis on the problems associated with it. Um, Maybe hint at or allude to some of the solutions. The body of the paper is going to consist of you elaborating, describing, explaining the problem or problems associated with your situation. Also, you're going to have plenty of opportunity to illustrate your solutions. And then in evaluating, really, this is kind of the conclusion. But in this sort of conclusion, in addition to the standard moves you might do in a conclusion, you're gonna you're gonna evaluate and sort of come to terms with the solutions that you propose to the problems. And so you're gonna do a little bit more work than you may do in a regular conclusion. There are a couple ways you can go about. Really, there are, you know, there's no rule book for this. But these types of papers, problem solution papers, are often handled because again, there are some more moving parts than we're used to so far. Handling them with a distinct organizational or structural scheme becomes a little more important. Um, One of the ways of looking at it is this so-called block structure, where you will basically have the first chunk or the first block of your paper, maybe after your introduction, maybe the first couple pages will be you composing paragraphs detailing the problem or problems associated with your situation. The next chunk or block will be some paragraphs composed in the service of providing solutions to those problems. So it's like all the problems are up front, and then you talk about all the solutions afterward in two big blocks, of course, but with separate paragraphs. There's another one called this point by point structure. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as a chain structure, where you'll compose an introduction or the situation as we called it up here. Um, and sort of each paragraph or each section, you'll have a problem and then the solution, and then another problem and another solution. Or if it's the same problem, that's fine. You'll talk about the problem and then a solution to that problem. Another problem, another solution to the problem. Um, but you don't chunk it up like you do up here. You go from point to point, point to point, point to point. These are just two ways. There are others, but these can be very helpful if you start to feel a little overwhelmed or a little bit lost, because we're probably going to be dealing with, again, more information, maybe some more sources. So you'll want to stay on top of your organization and your structure. As far as writing the paper, this whole top part up here was just kind of planning out and conceptualizing, how to go about starting your paper. Um, when it comes to actually writing the paper, this is where I got, I included there's some examples are included here of each of these points. We don't have to spend a lot of time reading them, but um, I think it's important that when you go to introduce your paper and you're discussing the situation, the topic, the issue, maybe some of the problems. You're starting to get into the problems. In the introduction, again, that you use your own words as much as you can. This is not a place and it's not an opportunity to see how well you can grab information from sources and stick it in an introduction. You want to be able to effectively and readily wield knowledge and information throughout your paper. And one of the best ways you can do that is if you can get to the point where you can talk about it using your own words. So let that be a goal early on, up above here as we, start out the writing the paper, conceptualizing the paper, so that when you do start to write it, you're prepared to actually use your own words. A lot of that ability is going to come from you being on top of reading. You want to read. You want to read broadly. You want to read diligently. You want to have a good understanding of your situation, of the topic and issue associated with your situation, problems, both as you see it, but maybe as you read up on it, you'll realize there are even greater problems or just more problem in terms of number than you realized. And so it'll be up to you to choose which problem or problems, plural. Again, you don't have to pick plural, but if there are a couple of problems, I don't know, two or three that you want to write about associated with your situation, that's fine. Um, but reading and read good sources. Try not to just read the first handful of, Google results that you get. Um, Use the library. We've looked a little bit about how to access certain scholarly sources if that's the route you want to go. And if you're not quite sure, you always talk to me, always ask me about this. But do read a lot. That's really the only way you're gonna become even more familiar than you might already be with not only the problems but also potential solutions, getting ideas for solutions. All of this, of course, is going to be spelled out in your narrowly tailored, focused thesis statement. So that's indispensable. We want that roadmap effect significantly, substantively here in this paper because, going back up to these organizational schemes, we're going to want to be able to see this, anticipate this by the way your thesis statement is structured. We'll probably go over that at some point in the next week or two, but um, this paper is not the place to have a very general or very vague thesis statement. We want to make it specific. We want to make it focused so that it really does this roadmap effect and and reveals to the reader what the pages subsequent to it will contain. When it comes to talking about your solutions, you want them to be solutions that could be implemented right now without much hassle or much fuss. Um, Lofty, long-term, maybe someday kind of solutions. Try to stay away from those. Try to get as concrete and realistic as you can. Um, that would directly, overtly address the problem, and not just in the idea in your head. The way you write about it is what I'm talking about here. Make direct and overt connections between the solutions to the problems as you see it. Please don't leave this up to your reader to sort of figure out on their own. Take them by their hand and lead them exactly where they need to be to understand your proposed solutions to the problems. And as you consider solutions, try to try to present them, try to conceive of them in ways that they apply to the most people possible. A solution is not going to be as effective if it only applies to a very narrow or limited number of people with respect to the problem. So when you come up with solutions, try to have them be um, as widely applicable as possible. And of course, we one of the ways that we do this is how we present examples, sources, or otherwise to support our solutions. So keep that relationship in mind. When you do your conclusion and you're evaluating and sort of taking a step back and looking, at what you did in terms of proposing solutions to problems associated with your situation. Um, the evaluation should discuss your solutions briefly, in part by reminding your reader of the main point and thesis statement, and it should sum up the goal of your solution. So this is kind of standard um, uh, conclusion ideas. It can also have a call to action where you note the sort of value of your solution. In other words, um, in reminding your reader of where you just were in these previous pages, try this out. I mean, this is a very powerful way of viewing your own writing. How can you take everything you've done and turn it into a call for people to adopt or to adhere to? It's really neat experience to try and do that and to put it into words. Um, going about this, what if my um, solutions, what if my call to action were implemented? What would that look like? And that's a really neat way to sort of evaluate and imagine um, what your solutions to the problems might look like. These are just some review things for polishing a paper. Okay, let's um, let's have a look now at the other prompt document I have for you. So here we got a due date of March 8th. That's just in about 3 weeks. Of course, we have our AI statement. This is similar to our previous prompt in terms of formatting. Um, Once again, here we have at least five full double space word processed pages according to MLA format. Um, the problem, solution, paper topic, or the situation as it's called often. This is going to be up to you again. I I think it's important for you, without repeating everything I've already have on this. I think it's important for you to not only have the freedom to choose what is important and what matters to you, but also get that practice choosing topics. It's not easy. I mean, it might seem easy, it might feel relieving at times to have that freedom, but it can also become a little overwhelming and it can become frustrating. And if it starts to go in that direction, just be in touch with me and we'll figure it out together. But um, and not only do I trust you to pick your own topic that's meaningful to you, I, it's your prerogative. It's your right. Um, it's what's going to make your paper come alive, and that's what's very important. Um, so this is just refocusing us on what that previous document said, that the problem solution paper focuses on a particular problem um, that you need to come up with a solution for, um, or solutions plural. And here I have some of the key elements is really what the this prompt this prompting document is doing. You'll notice a lot of similarity in terms of elements of the. Um, I gotta change this. This is a typo. Um, from the reaction paper, actually. Here, I want to draw your attention to this middle point. In the reaction paper, when we were focusing on one text or an author to react to, here with the problem solution paper, there's no requirement to do that, obviously. Um, so um, your introduction could be this sort of not steps, but these considerations that we make in introducing our discussion to our reader, situating our reader, um, and obviously the end of the conclusion is where we start to wrap and we start to present our thesis statement. But here in the middle, if you happen to have a text, maybe two at the most, that you plan on returning to regularly throughout your paper for comparison or because it's such a, a paragon of of useful information for you as you dig into your problem and propose solutions, you can introduce that here. There's just no requirement to. If you're going to be just, for example, maybe you have a text here that really sheds light on and introduces well your situation, your topic or your issue, and you regularly refer back to it throughout your paper. It might be useful to introduce that here. But if you're just using random sources to sort of to use as examples to support the points that you make throughout your paper, you don't have to include this part of your introduction. Here I have optional. This is if you do have some kind of text that you're going to use throughout your paper and you introduce it here, it may be effective to go ahead and summarize that here. But if you're gonna again not use that sort of central main text or author, and you're just going to use a handful of other supporting texts, you don't have to summarize them here. But I just included this so you can uh, be reminded of what summary writing ought to consist of, at least in part. So block method or point by point method paragraphs. That's what all this is about. These are just, again, some of the elements of what could or should go into those body paragraphs. Um, I was considering making some bullet points for each of these, but that would have made our prompt even longer than than it needs to be. So I just tried to boil it down, like what is going to go in the problem and solution paragraphs, either of these organization or structural methods. Um, and you could probably predict some of this. I want to see some very focused, very effective topic sentences that are reflective of your thesis statement. Um, I want to see you clearly and directly describe and explain and discuss the problems related to your situation. This is the place where you could bring in source material to help you describe and characterize your problem. Um, Likewise, if you need to bring in source material to help support you and buoy you up when you discuss solutions to those problems, again, whether you're doing block method or point by point, this is where all that kind of discussion and source material should go. I expect to see accurate and appropriate citation and integration of quoted or paraphrased material. Um, Try not to neglect discussion of rhetoric. And again, that's a key point of our course this semester. Um, as you're describing the problems from and reflected in your sources, maybe you could talk how they're presented rhetorically or the rhetorical work that they're doing um, as the problem is laid out for the audience. There are a number of ways you can do, but just if you start to notice particular rhetorical strategies or techniques in and among your sources, um, that'd be a great thing to write about. And here we just talked about conclusions in the previous document, but it's the same thing here. Consider pointing your reader to thoughts and ideas a bit beyond the sort of standard rehashing or restating of your thesis. But again, you don't want to start a whole new paper here in the conclusion. Um, how the solutions to problems you discussed might be applied or what their implications are, how it contributes to a larger sort of conversation surrounding the situation. Um, whether call to action or that what if scenario we talked about. Um, and here I want to remind you all the work that we do in our blogs, the work that you did in your reaction paper. If you want to sort of conceive of our major writing assignments as building on one another, you certainly can. I'm not saying that you should, take your reaction paper and just start from it and start adding to it. But if you can see a through line or an argument or some main points that came up in your reaction paper that you would like to sort of continue and develop further, I think that's totally appropriate. Um, I'm not inviting you to do things like copy and paste entire pages of your reaction paper to stand in for this. But again, if you developed a way of seeing a problem or an issue in that reaction paper that you think would be helpful in getting you started with this problem solution paper, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that um, that's one of the reasons why we do these papers as we do in a sequence is to sort of help us build and develop skills, foundational skills, build on top of those skills and build on top of those skills. Also, invest yourself personally in your writing, using I statements, in other words. Again, I want to see you and your voice emerge in your writing as much as possible. 3 weeks. Let us not delay. Um, and we'll get started here very soon. Okay, see you in class.